Hello and welcome to part 3. Let us continue with the criticisms. I know that Jessica died, was heavily implied to have been abused by the music teacher, was good friends with Blake and Lynn, had a crush on Blake, had some implied issues with family suggested by her wanting to go to Blake's house, and her reaction when Loudermilk manipulated her by telling her family. And that's all I know about Jessica. Blake, I know that Blake yells Lynn.
Lynn!
Swears a lot.
Fuck this.
Does absolutely nothing to defend himself or his loved ones. Feels guilty about keeping quiet about Jessica's death. Was in a play with Lynn and is now married to Lynn. Lynn, I know that Lynn is Blake's wife. She was friends with Blake and Jessica in the school. She gets hit with the morphogenic engine side effects and dies. This is what I know, and this is what I have to work with based on what the game itself has told me. I don't know anything about Lynn and Blake's relationship. Why is Lynn the reporter? Why is Blake behind the camera? Why isn't it the other way around? What determined this setup? Why doesn't Blake do everything in his power to rescue or defend Lynn as they got caught? Because like I said, I don't give a damn how much of a pacifist you are. If you see your wife getting choked out, you are going to be throwing some fucking hands, or biting some arms, or picking up some rocks, or some shit that isn't laying there like a sack of potatoes just taking it, Blake. For a last positive, I should mention I do like some of the transitions that they have. Very well crafted, very smooth. I like them. Chase sequences. This one is probably the biggest criticism I have for this game, next to the school stuff. You will be chased a lot. And before you ask why they aren't chasing me as aggressively as you'll see in the other videos, it's because I'm playing in story mode. Playing the game in story mode supposedly reduces enemy encounters, so less chases. I've only seen 2 encounters get taken away. You take less damage when spotted, and it's easier to sneak past the enemies because of their reduced perception and speed. The only thing this game has you do, outside of the follow the leader objective cues, is getting chased by the bad guy of the week. This mechanic is severely overused, and I'm not the only one who saw this as a negative.
Game, you'll be running, getting lost, and avoiding enemies pretty much the whole game. And if you like games like that, you're gonna love this. But to me, after the first couple chases, it just got old. It was like playing the Five Nights at Freddy's games, where the first few tries are really intense and scary, but after that it's just boring and frustrating.
A lot of Outlast 2 is dedicated to elaborate and lengthy chase sequences, which worked in the first game due to the confined environment of Mount Massive, but they don't really work here. It's much easier to manufacture an easily navigable interactive chase sequence in an interior location like Mount Massive, because you can cue the player with very obvious things like cracked doors, hanging ventilation shafts, and specific lighting. It's easy to move through the asylum quickly because there's obviously a finite amount of places to go, and those places are for the most part indicated very explicitly. Most of the second game's chases, however, take place outside, in linear corridors that are disguised as open wooded areas. So immediately your instincts kick in to just run into the woods, but you can't. You have to run in this exact place in the woods, over this exact fucking tree trunk, and it's just a muddy, confusing visual mess. Eventually, a lot of the chase sequences became pure trial and error for me, simply due to the fact that I kept dying over and over again because I didn't know where precisely the developer wanted me to stand at any given moment.
It's used so much that throughout one of my playthroughs, I got so incredibly annoyed, so I froze them. Now, you can yell at me that that's cheating and that I'm not getting the full intended experience. Yes, you're correct. I am cheating. As for the experience, well, My argument is your horror game should do more to have the player be afraid than just using chases. If I can stop the main scare aspect, the thing that makes me not want to go further of the whole game, by freezing entity pathfinding, the way I see it, your horror game needs to have something else. For there is far more to horror than chases. Yes, having a creature in the room with you and knowing it is quite hostile to you and bad things will happen if it catches you is indeed an element of the horror genre. It is largely used, and combined with the right atmosphere, it can be effective. However, there is more to horror games that will scare the player than just the creature in the room. And sometimes, it is far more terrifying to not have anything in the room at all. My example? Of course, Amnesia. Why am I referencing Amnesia here? Well, I'm gonna do a bit more than that, but I'm referencing it because of what I talked about just a minute ago. The chase sequence mechanic being overused. Thomas Grip, the co-founder of Frictional Games, talked about game design with a 4 layers approach in a lecture. In that lecture, he shows a graph to illustrate how he lays out the gameplay process. He organizes this graph with 2 spaces, the system space and the story space. In these spaces, he describes the gameplay process. The system space with 1, mechanics, the literal things you're able to do in the game. 2, dynamics, the things the mechanics can do when used in conjunction with each other. And 3, aesthetics, how one dresses these mechanics to prevent players from looking at them as mechanics, which is very, very important to have. And the story space works with the gameplay with 1, mise-en-scene, the object and locations that are in the game to assist with the mechanics. 2, drama, the reason the event is happening in the moment. And 3, narrative, which builds the reason for the story happening in the first place. It is important that the player only sees the layers in the story space, not the system space. In that lecture, he says this.
You think about this is basically, this here is what you want the player to what the player should be seeing as they're doing their stuff. And in a game like Tetris, this doesn't really matter, because it doesn't matter if the Tetris blocks are like, is it crystals, is it stone? It doesn't really matter that much to that game, because these two, like, they're very, very similar. You can play Tetris in a very abstract way. Mario loses a lot of the appeal if you remove this. You could just have, you know, squares and circles and stuff like that in a Mario game, which is this space. I'm gonna say space from now on, so we know. The system space. So you can play Mario in the system space, but in the story space, it's harder. And the same goes for other games, like an adventure game would be very hard to play in system space, because you wouldn't know what the hell any object would be. It's very, very important that you know what the object is. And I think I need to just explain a little bit, but how stuff like this then work is that you have mechanics. Say that you have a role-playing game, and you have in your role-playing game you can befriend a rabbit, and he's hilarious, and he just walks next to you, and he constantly says stupid things depending on what else is happening, and then the idea is to be able to make the designer's idea is to make a very lovable companion rabbit. And what happens in the mechanics view, the systems view, is that he has some sort of pathfinding. He knows that he needs to be close to the player, and he has some certain rules that he doesn't know shit about what's happening here, but he has certain rules that are going to play sound bites, depending on, he's going to have a large library of sound bites, and he's going to pick out those lines depending on the situation. So, but here in the mise-en-scene and the drama, what we have mise-en-scene, we have a rabbit. So we're gonna make because rabbits are cute. It's gonna be hilarious when you design this. Oh, fuck! Oh, this is the rabbit. Oh, he's gonna be great. And then the drama is when you have a situation. So the player is just killed like an ogre or something like that, and he says, "Oh, good going, master," or something like that. Cheerio. And then that's great drama. So we have something here that's intended. So you have planned a certain drama to happen that happens depending on the dynamics. Dynamics is something an enemy gets killed, a quip gets played, and the drama is that you have certain lines that are to be played in the mise-en-scene, and then when that combines with you seeing the dragon or ogre, I think I said it before, ogre being slain, so something happened. But then what happens in the player's head here can be very depend a lot. So say that the player notices this the first time he does, and it's like, oh, the rabbit is hilarious. It's like, cheerio, old mate, he says, and then you kill another ogre, and the rabbit says, oh, cheerio, mate. So didn't you say that last time, rabbit? And and then later on you kill another ogre, and it's like, cheerio, mate, and like, what the fuck? Suddenly you start noticing the system here. He's not a rabbit, that's not a rabbit. He's just playing canned lines, the bastard. He lied to me. Suddenly you go from the story layer. You don't notice that. You just notice the systems instead. So what you're doing there is that the mental model of the rabbit is suddenly changed, and then perhaps you can notice that if you let the ogre kill him, he's gonna cost you. He's gonna throw you a health potion, because the system here thinks that if he's killed, then the player must be really bad because he's a lovable rabbit. The player would never allow anything bad to happen to him. But now you've just figured out that he's he might not be the rabbit I first thought he was. So now you do that. You lure him to the ogre, and the ogre bashes him and said, "Oh, help me, master! Help me, master!" And he's just throwing health potions at you. And normally the intended drama here is that, oh, I'm gonna save you, rabbit, but you're like, oh, he's just an automaton. Give me those juicy health potions. So all of a sudden you go into the systems view more. From this we can derive a lot of interesting stuff. So say that in a game like Heavy Rain or an interactive movie, a lot of people are annoyed because their choices doesn't matter, and some say, oh, but it's picking the decision that's matter and stuff like that. And I first thought, oh, whiny people, why whine about that? But then I started thinking about, no, they're not whining. They're just more sensitive to this gameplay things, or that they have a different a subjective, their mind model is a little bit different when making the choices. So they can see more clearly than everyone. They're not more whiner. They just see things a little bit more clearly. So what they're doing in Heavy Rain, for instance, or in Until Dawn or whatever interactive movie, is that you're making a mental model of, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to her, then we're going to pick up the axe, and then we're going to, and then when I picked up the axe, I can smash the door. Or even actually, better example is actually, I'm going to talk to this guy, I'm going to be very friendly to him, and then he's going to help me out later on. And then when it turns out that you understand that later on, he just does the same thing. There's some Deus Ex Machina, like, oh, I want to help you out, but there's a rock in the way. Let's just go to the path that the designers thought we were going to walk in. Then the planning is ruined because the mental model, that worked great, awesome. Now executing systems that failed. Gameplay sucks. So you can evaluate like that in these things, and it can fail on many different levels. Then you also have something like an adventure puzzle. So typical adventure puzzle is like, okay, shit, I have this puzzle, I have a rope, I need to tie it somewhere in order to lift the trapdoor, and I can tie it in that pulley, and then I can put a rock on it, and it's gonna go down. Okay, fucking great. I'm the best. I'm so smart. And then you do it, and then the game says, you know, I can't pick that up. So, and like, what the fuck? You know, I tried picking up the rope. Obviously, my mind model said I could pick up the rope. And what happens eventually in these games, as you can see, is that what you're going to be doing, your mind model is going to shrink here. So you're going to see, you know, nothing matters. You know, there's no ropes, doesn't exist anymore. It's just a, you know, a clickable area. You don't see it as a system and as a story thing anymore, which is crucial for adventure games. You see it as a system.
This video has so much information that explains why certain elements of a game are important. I really recommend watching it if you have any interest in game design. Anyway, what Mr. Grip describes with his example of the talking rabbit is essentially what is happening here with the amount of chase scenes that are in Outlast 2. They're happening with so much frequency that you no longer see the story space when it happens. You jump straight to the systems. You don't see the story. You see the machine behind it. You don't see it as Vol is chasing me or Nick and Laird are hunting me. You see it as the game is having me be chased again. I'm being chased. And the more times that this happens, the more you understand how it works. And in horror games, I found it is far scarier when you don't know how it works. I hold Amnesia as the very best in horror games, which is why I feel confident enough to refer to Thomas Grip for game design, and that I trust he knows what he's talking about based on the amount of work that went into making Amnesia what it is. Adding on to that, another person you should watch, if you don't know about him already, is Mauler. He goes into greater depth about enemy mechanics in his series on Outlast and Amnesia vs. Soma. I would suggest watching them if you would like to know more. I think any attempt that I make towards explaining the subject further would honestly do it a disservice. Anyway, back on topic, throughout the playthroughs where I didn't freeze the enemies, I still lost them very easily in normal mode. I often had to go back and fetch them to kind of convince them to continue their chase. However, I would like to make an observation, as I found something interesting. Even though I can freeze the enemies, they still have to spawn. So I can, in a sense, see where they are at any point in the world. You'll see here that Marta will spawn to chase me into the house to prompt me to go find the hook. However, she's now gone, nowhere to be found. I continue to go get the hook, only to have her lock the door on me. As I get out, she is now found behind the locked gate. Once you enter, she's no longer there. So where did she go? Well, dear viewer, she teleported to the shed to kick the door open, to prompt you to crawl inside the shed as she walks out, to confuse her for a few seconds, to lead her around this roundabout here to shimmy through the entrance of the building where you were prompted to go find the hook in the first place. However, if you walk back out, you will find that she has despawned, no longer being a danger until her next pre-scripted appearance, which is right outside the door, breaking it down as soon as you attach the hook. So it doesn't matter how far away you get. She'll always be there, ready and scripted. Also, funny note, my enemy freezing power extends to the doors as well, so I can't open the doors with it on. Alright, and finally, remember the inspiration that I mentioned? Remember the game was inspired by a lot of research into the Jonestown Massacre? How much research do you consider to be a lot? Well, apparently to Red Barrel, it amounts to modeling Temple Gate based off of Jonestown, naming the area Temple Gate, which could be a nod to People's Temple, which was what became the cult in Jonestown, and a mass poisoning. Those are the only things that I could identify as being inspired by that event, which doesn't take a lot of research. I found all of this in a single Google search. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We finally made it through all of the main criticisms. This was a long section, but the end is in sight. Next, we have Murkoff, and that will not take as long. I promise. So I will see you in part 4.